The sudden death of Adam Harrison, son of Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars at the age of just 39, has left family, friends, and fans stunned. Here's what Adam's family had to say.
This isn't the Pawn Stars you remember, because some of its most beloved faces are gone, and the truth behind their deaths is more heartbreaking than fans ever realized. After the cameras stopped filming, some stories took a really tough turn.
Friends and family saying their final goodbyes Sunday to 77-year-old Richard Harrison.
What happened behind the scenes that shocked loyal viewers? Join us as we share the untold stories of 10 loved members of Pawn Stars who sadly passed away. Number 10. Adam Harrison. Adam Harrison was not interested in being a TV star, but he was still a major piece of the family puzzle. As Rick's son and Cory's brother, he was around the gold and silver pawn shop, just without the cameras following his every move. Apparently, he had zero desire to be famous. He put in some time at the shop back in the day, but eventually he ditched the family business to become a plumber. He chose fixing pipes over dealing with greedy collectors and reality TV scripts, which is honestly a pretty relatable move. Die-hard fans knew who he was, even if he stayed away from the cameras. In early 2024, news broke that Adam Harrison died from an overdose involving fentanyl and meth. Rick Harrison eventually went public to confirm the tragedy himself. The family put out a standard statement about being heartbroken and wanting some space to deal with the mess in private. Rick also threw up a post on Instagram saying his son would always be in his heart. It was a rare, dark moment for a family that usually spends its time haggling over old coins and dusty relics. Pawn Stars was already filming season 23 when the news hit. A family member made it clear the show isn't going to talk about it, and there won't be any more public comments. They decided to keep the mourning process away from the cameras, and most fans actually backed off for once. Adam was only 39. His death is just a blunt reminder that being famous or having a successful TV show doesn't stop life from being a complete disaster sometimes. No amount of money or big hoss jokes can protect a family from a genuine tragedy. Meanwhile, even before this loss was fully processed, the show's most recognizable face had already been carrying a very different kind of grief, one he had been living with for years. Number 9. Richard the Old Man. Harrison. Everyone knew Richard Benjamin Harrison as the Old Man, the grumpy patriarch who basically held the entire Pawn Stars circus together. He grew up in Virginia back in the 40s and eventually opened the gold and silver pawn shop with Rick in the late 80s. As soon as the cameras started rolling, he became the fan favorite because he was blunt, mean, and didn't have a filter. He wasn't there to be your friend or act nice for the ratings. He was just a sharp-witted guy who knew how to call out a bad deal and look bored while doing it. Before the fame hit, the old man actually had a life worth talking about. He did his time in the Navy and then tried to make it big in real estate, which ended with him losing over $1 million. Instead of giving up, he dragged his family to Las Vegas to start over from scratch. The pawn shop ended up being his real legacy, and the show just let the rest of the world see the grumpy character he had been building for years. People loved him because he was blunt and didn't have time for anyone's nonsense, whether it was a clueless customer or his own family. Losing $1 million just to end up arguing over old watches in a desert shop is a classic American success story. It really shows that if people fail hard enough, eventually someone will put them on TV for it. The old man finally clocked out on June 25, 2018, after dealing with Parkinson's. He was 77. Rick hopped on Instagram that same day to tell everyone he lost his dad and his best friend. The shop followed up with the usual official statement, calling him the best family man anyone could ask for. They described him as the grumpy voice of reason on the show. which is a nice way of saying he was the only one in the building who wasn't totally delusional. His passing left a deep mark on the series. However, just as one chapter of Lost closed, new challenges were already forming for members of the cast who were still very much alive, even if the internet had other ideas. Number 8. Austin Chumlee. Russell. Austin Chumlee Russell may be one of the most hoaxed people in the history of reality television. Beginning in May 2013, a rumor circulated online claiming that Chumlee had passed away from a marijuana overdose, with fabricated quotes from Rick Harrison mourning the loss of his buddy. Snopes. The story was completely invented by a satirical website and had no basis in fact whatsoever. A year later, in March 2014, a second false report claimed he had died of a heart attack, with the story reportedly linked to his dramatic weight loss at the time. Clive Health fans panicked. The story spread quickly across social media before Chumlee himself stepped in to shut it down. He took to Twitter to confirm he was alive, and Rick Harrison publicly backed him up, posting that Chumlee was alive and well, and had actually been filming that very day. People love a good tragedy, but the internet is basically a factory for fake funerals. Chumlee has been the target of these death rumors more times than anyone can count. Back in 2016, things got messy with some actual legal trouble and a raid on his house. Against the odds, he didn't just survive. He actually pulled himself together. And fast forward to 2026. He is still very much upright and breathing. As one cast member debunked rumors about his health, another was dealing with a very real and very serious accident that nearly cost him his life. Number 7. Cory "Big Hoss" Harrison. Cory Harrison spent over 10 years stuck in the pawn shop, playing the role of the resident heavy on Pawn Stars. Everyone knows him as Big Hoss, the guy who spent 2 decades bickering with his old man, Rick, for the sake of basic cable entertainment. He was there from the very first episode in 2009, grinding through more than 20 seasons before the cameras finally took a break. Even though the constant filming eventually stopped, he hasn't exactly vanished into thin air. He is still a massive part of the weird Las Vegas ecosystem. People still obsess over him, mostly because watching a grown man argue with his father over the price of a rusty toy is apparently the peak of human culture. In January 2026, Cory was involved in a serious motorcycle crash while riding in Tulum, Mexico. He suffered 11 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, a concussion, and internal bleeding. The injuries were severe enough to require multiple hospital stays, and the cost of medical care in Mexico added another layer of difficulty. Cory had to empty his entire bank account to cover what he could of the bills. The wreck didn't just mess up his bike, it trashed his schedule too. He ended up skipping his dad's wedding, which he announced on Instagram with a "Sorry Pops" post. It's a pretty bold move to miss a wedding because of a near-death experience, but family is complicated like that. Soon after, a friend started a GoFundMe to pay for the damage. Rick Harrison eventually chimed in to say he had already handled the medical bills before the internet started passing the hat around. He eventually got back on his feet, and his spokesperson promised he would be fine. It just goes to show that having a TV show doesn't actually make anyone bulletproof or immune to gravity. However, this was far from the only brush with danger in the Pawn Stars family's history. Another cast member had faced very real legal troubles that removed him from the show entirely. Number 6. Johnny Jimenez Jr. Johnny Jimenez was basically the face of toys on Pawn Stars. He spent years as the guy the shop called whenever someone dragged in a box of old junk from their attic. When he wasn't on camera, he was running Toy Shack, his own spot tucked away in a Las Vegas mall. The crew at the pawn shop had him on speed dial for anything vintage or collectible. People actually liked watching him because he didn't act like a bored academic. He had a weirdly high amount of energy for grown-up toys, and he actually knew what he was talking about. He was one of the regular consultants on Pawn Stars when it came to vintage toys, helping Chumlee and the Harrisons reach deals on numerous occasions throughout the years. Looper, however, his appearances on the show eventually came to an end following a series of legal incidents. In 2015, Jimenez was arrested and charged with domestic attack after an incident at a Las Vegas restaurant. IMDb. The story attracted significant media attention and cast a shadow over his public profile. The legal drama is what finally killed his time on the show. Despite what some bored people on the internet might think, there is no obituary or death notice for Johnny Jimenez because he is very much alive. He didn't leave because of a health scare or a quiet retirement. He left because his life choices caught up with him. As one familiar face departed under difficult circumstances, another expert connected to the show was about to face questions of a very different kind, ones that would follow him for years. Number 5. The spin-off star's difficult exit. Rick Dale turned fixing old junk into a massive career. He showed up on Pawn Stars so often that people actually started to care about his workshop, which eventually landed him a spin-off called American Restoration back in 2010. For anyone watching the show, he was the guy the shop called when they bought something that looked like it had been sitting at the bottom of a lake for 50 years. He made a name for himself by taking rusted piles of metal and making them look brand new again. He was a staple of that world, mostly because he could actually turn a piece of garbage back into something valuable. To be clear, Rick Dale isn't dead. He hasn't popped up in any obituaries, even if the internet likes to pretend otherwise. He just kept doing his restoration work away from the cameras once the show folded. His career didn't end in a disaster, it just changed lanes. Being the star of a spin-off comes with a lot of noise, and when the money and the vision stopped lining up, the show was the first thing to get dumped. From the world of restoration, attention turns to one of the show's most enduring in-house personalities, a man whose health became the subject of national speculation and who proved the internet wrong in the most direct way possible. Number 4. Rick Harrison. Rick Harrison is Pawn Stars. From the very first episode, he was the show's anchor, the knowledgeable, quick-talking owner of the gold and silver, who somehow always seemed to know the history of whatever landed on his counter. Harrison and his father opened the shop together in 1989, and when the show debuted in 2009, Rick became one of the most recognized faces on cable television. His reputation as a self-made businessman and voracious reader made him an unlikely but compelling television star. Over the years, Rick Harrison has faced a series of genuine personal trials. The death of his father in 2018 was a public and painful loss. Then, in January 2024, the death of his son Adam hit the Harrison family hard, with Rick and Cory both taking to Instagram to share their heartbreak. Looper. These were not rumors or hoaxes. They were real losses that reshaped the family. Rick still managed to continue his work, eventually remarrying in January 2026, a ceremony Cory was unable to attend due to his motorcycle accident. Throughout all of this, Rick Harrison remained a consistent and active public figure. He continued to make television appearances, conduct interviews, and run the gold and silver pawn shop that his father helped build. The show entered an indefinite hiatus after the end of its History Channel contract, but Rick made clear that his chapter in the television world was far from finished. His story is one of a man who weathered multiple storms and kept moving forward. Meanwhile, another long-standing face of the show had been quietly stepping away from the spotlight. Not because of tragedy, but because of a very personal decision about what the future should look like. Number 3. Danny Coker, the Count Coker. Danny Coker first appeared in the Pawn Stars world as the show's go-to car expert, called in whenever a vehicle rolled through the doors of the gold and silver pawn shop. Before starring in his own show, Coker appeared on Pawn Stars as the resident car expert for Rick Harrison, who has an impressive car collection of his own. Counting Cars launched in 2012 and ran for 10 seasons, making it one of the History Channel's longest-running programs. New episodes stopped airing in 2021, and there was never an official cancellation announcement. When the show quietly disappeared from the schedule without explanation, the internet filled the silence with speculation. Rumors began circulating claiming Coker was battling cancer, facing prison time, or promoting CBD products on a major news network. None of these stories had any basis in fact. In a direct response to the rumors, Coker confirmed that none of the stories were true. He explained that fake social media accounts and deep-fake images had been used to spread false information about him for years. Internet hoaxes even claimed he had passed away, but those rumors were debunked, and Coker continued to be active in his various business ventures. He made clear that he was personally only active on one social media platform and warned fans to report any fake accounts using his name or image. His story, from beloved TV personality to a man dealing with the very real costs of living abroad without a safety net, captured the complicated reality of what life after fame can look like. Number 2. Mark Hall-Patton. Mark Hall-Patton became one of the most beloved recurring experts on Pawn Stars over the show's long run. Experts called in by the pawn shop to appraise items became fan-favorite characters in their own right, and Mark Hall-Patton was among the most recognizable of them all. Looper, as the administrator of the Clark County Museum System in Las Vegas, brought genuine expertise and a warm, enthusiastic delivery that viewers connected with immediately. His appearances became one of the more reliable highlights of any given episode. Hall-Patton appeared in hundreds of episodes, covering everything from ancient coins to Civil War artifacts to presidential memorabilia. His deep knowledge of history and his ability to explain complex background information in simple, engaging terms made him a natural fit for a show that was, at its heart, about the stories behind objects. No other recurring expert matched his volume of appearances or his consistency as a presence on the show. Mark Hall-Patton is still alive and doing professional work. There has been no death notice or obituary published for him. His story belongs on this list not as a tragedy, but as a tribute to the role that recurring experts played in shaping the show's identity. Without figures like Hall-Patton, Pawn Stars would have been a very different program and much less educational. Number 1. Richard the Old Man Harrison. It is fitting to return to Richard the Old Man. Harrison one final time, because no list of beloved Pawn Stars figures can be properly closed without acknowledging the full weight of what the world lost when he passed. The History Channel released a statement calling him a beloved member of the History and Pawn Stars family, and saying he would be greatly missed for his wisdom and candor. IMDb. Those words were not just polite formality. They reflected a genuine truth about what the old man meant to the show. Even when absent from filming, the old man was usually the first to arrive at the shop in the mornings. By 2010, he reportedly had not taken a single sick day since 1994. That level of dedication spoke to a man who defined himself through his work and his family's legacy. The pawn shop was not just a business to him. It was the result of a life rebuilt after setbacks, and he poured everything into it. In the wake of his passing, the show adapted by honoring his memory, with tributes woven into episodes that allowed fans to reflect on his contributions and celebrate what he had meant to the series. People were way more attached to the old man than they probably realized until he actually kicked the bucket. Even if fans never met him, it felt like losing a relative because he'd been grumbling in their living rooms for years. He was the one constant in a show that was mostly just people arguing over old coins. It's funny how a man who made a career out of being annoyed by everyone became the person everyone missed the most. People just really enjoy a consistent level of grumpiness. Which of these stories came as the biggest surprise? And does knowing the real story behind a favorite show change the way viewers remember it? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.